Hi, I'm James Shen, and I'm here representing People's Architecture Office. We're based in Beijing. I'd like to share our project Courthouse plugin with you, and I'm going to start with a video to give a bit of background on the project.
People love these historic areas of Beijing for obvious reasons. Lots of people love to come and visit, and a lot of people have the idea of staying here. But once they realize that it can be really cold in the winter, very hot in the summer, there's no bathroom, there's no sewers, very little plumbing, then they think differently. Because this is really stuff from another era. I mean, it hasn't been modernized because it's very difficult to modernize. Everything in China is huge, I mean, they just dig up things and destroy things, and it's an issue of practicality. There's such a need, it's such an effort to do any of this that this kind of blanket way of doing things is the only practical way people have at the moment. That would be raising buildings, putting in new roads or sewage lines or electricity. Once that policy is in place, it's all done at once. It's over. It's drastic, it's traumatic. In Dashilar, you have courtyards like this, where families have been here for really hundreds of years. I mean, this courtyard is literally about 300 years old. The family that used to live here, they don't live here, but they have a shop that's just at the front of this courtyard house. They're not willing to leave this area. They still have their roots here, and even though this courtyard is not necessarily a place where they live anymore, it still has a lot of sentimental value for them. The reason why they're not being used is because it would cost a lot of money to renovate. Not just that, the most difficult thing is no one would be willing to renovate something that is partially used by other people. Our approach was to not change as much as possible. Our project is literally inserted into the old house. You can think of it as a house within a house. So it's made up of modules, these panels, and they're fitted together like IKEA furniture. They're standardized parts with a hex wrench. You just, with a twist, lock everything together, and it becomes airtight, waterproof. Each panel is prefabricated, made in a factory, in a production line. Packed up, shipped over here. And each panel has insulation, structure, kind of a drywall type of material on the interior, and has an exterior surface that is sheet metal. All this is molded all at once. The wiring and the plumbing and everything is integrated into the panels. So by doing that, we're able to really reduce the cost of production. To estimate the cost, we're comparing things that offer equal living standards. So that means it has to be equally energy efficient. Our panel system costs about 400 RMB per square meter. About half or even less than that of renovating the old structure. And rebuilding from scratch would cost probably 4 or 5 times that. Each house, the north house and the south house, took less than a day to build. It took a little bit more time to just paint things and to put in the flooring and connect the wiring. What happens after this can be pretty broad. But the whole reason of having this is to test out a first prototype for use in other courtyard houses. It could be used for offices, it could be used for living. But in all these cases, it would provide you with all the modern amenities that you require. The value of keeping a lot of this old structure is the things that happened here. I mean, these places are places you can't find anywhere else in the world. There's no reason why it can't be woven with our modern day of life.
So what you saw was about 2 years ago was our first Courthouse plugin, and it's part of a pilot in an area called Dashilar in Beijing. Now these are plug-in panels, and they're designed as modular prefabricated components that can be transported by hand into these very narrow alleyways that make up these old neighborhoods in Beijing. So you can see they have to wind through small areas, and also they have to go through very small doorways, and the buildings are constructed from the inside. The panels are designed and developed by us. This is not something you can find on the market, it's proprietary. So we really started from the most basic components to solve these also very basic problems. The panels consist of a composite. It's mostly polyurethane insulation, which is the core. There's no additional structure. Its strength comes from it being a composite. The interior surface is MgO, magnesium oxide board, and the outside is sheet metal. And the whole thing is molded in one piece, integrated with wiring and so on. And we also integrate these locks called cam locks into these panels. So with a twist, everything comes together. Now these panels are extremely energy efficient. One of the biggest issues with these areas is that they're, the houses are just very old and don't do much to insulate. So these panels are about 10 times as energy efficient as traditional courtyard houses. And the standards that we are meeting with this are twice the standards of the city of Beijing. And also because we're using this kind of lock, the whole entire structure is very well sealed. So with one tool and a few people that are unskilled, you can build a new house in just really one day, and for a fraction of the cost that it would take to do your typical renovation, less than half the cost. These neighborhoods are very old, several centuries old, or these structures are several centuries old. And they've gone through quite a tumultuous history, as you can imagine, in China. And this history is shown in these buildings. You can see the layers of the history, the traces of them. And because of this, these communities are extremely tight-knit. Now, over time, these neighborhoods have really started to degrade from overcrowding and just neglect. Courtyard houses were originally single-family homes and then have become subdivided into multifamily housing through the Cultural Revolution. And then afterwards, as people became more wealthy, a lot of people have just moved out. And currently, most courtyard houses are still multifamily, but they have a lot of vacant spaces that they're just left there. And every single one of our projects deals with these shared courtyard houses. So they're not entirely vacant courtyard houses. Here you can see the first example, some before and after photos. This as well. And here I'd like to talk a little bit about our sort of aesthetic approach. We also see this project not only as dealing with these sort of everyday problems of living standards, but also a way of preserving history in this community. So instead of trying to fake history or trying to redo it, we just leave it as it is. We don't tear anything down from the original structure. We don't even repaint anything, we just kind of leave it as it is. And unless if there's some structural issues, we'll do some reinforcement. And then our plugin is a standalone building that's inside these structures. You can see here, this is the Tiananmen Square, this is the Forbidden City, and this is the Dashilar area. And you can even just see from the scale of things. This is a Qianmen area, a very busy tourist area, that was completely torn down and totally rebuilt, but rebuilt to look like the old city. But certainly when you go there, you just feel that it's more like a Disneyland. Dashilar is taking a different approach. It's trying to provide an alternative to this kind of a large-scale change. So our plug-in system is really designed as an urban solution. It's not something that's meant to be used on a case-to-case basis. So we designed a whole series of guidelines and a whole manual on how you would actually use this system. And also we went in and we surveyed the whole area. We have all this information in the computer. And we went out and sort of planned what spaces would be best used for what kind of programs, right? So some would be for residential use, some would be for office use, and so on. And we came up with a whole series of guidelines for that. Now this is a map of the area and our master plan of it. And everything that you see in color are, it's a little bit fuzzy here, but everything that you see in color are vacant spaces. So there's a lot of that here. We also wanted to direct the system to locals being able to engage in this whole process themselves. So we have this software that's online, that's live now, and that local residents can put in different modules, such as new bathrooms or bedrooms and so on, and they can adjust their own layout. And the software will calculate how much energy savings they'll have, how much it'll cost. They're able to see immediately some of the benefits of using this. Here are some of the plugins that we've done, and we've by now built about 20 of these Courthouse plugins. And you can see the juxtaposition of old and new. We see them see the old aspects and the new aspects as being complementary to each other. You don't need to choose one over the other. There does not have to be a conflict. This is a small publishing house. So these are all offices that are now functioning in this area. And we also moved our own office to this area to bring ourselves closer to the work. Because for this kind of project, you can't just build it and go. You have to kind of deal with all the upkeep and so on. So we're always there and continuing to build more. This is an image of our office. This is a before and after. We also try to be really creative with our system. We didn't want it to just be something that is kind of too much of an off-the-shelf kind of thing. And we really taken advantage of these plug-in panels, taking advantage of their lightness and their flexibility, and trying to open up the interiors to these courtyards. Here I have another video that shows how these actually work. So this room, we think of it as an extension that they would use in the winter, can actually open up in the summertime, and it would provide for shade in the courtyard. This is Miss Dong. Her plugin has this sort of accordion shower. I'll explain a little bit more about this a little bit later. But this makes her very happy. And also these doors don't sacrifice the energy efficiency. They're the same panels. They're just as insulating, but they're also very well sealed with rubber gaskets all the way around. So we take this issue very seriously, but it doesn't keep us from being creative with it. And again, here we have essentially a door within a door. A whole entire facade that can open up and allow people to enjoy the outdoors. Now in these very small living spaces, you really need to take advantage of these outdoor spaces like this. And this just makes these spaces much more livable. So you've already seen some of the residential spaces that we've done. This was the first one. Some of the older components. We left some of the spaces open so that you can see the old structure, the rooftop. And every one of these courtyards have their stories. You know, why is it painted green? Why is it using this kind of roof tile? There's always a very good story behind all of these questions. We left some skylights open to have some natural ventilation, but also to see some of the old structure. Now, toilets are a very important thing. There's no sewage system in this area. This prevents a lot of people from wanting to live there. So we've used two different approaches. One is a composting toilet that is waterless. It's pretty much off the grid. And we're also using, for larger courtyards, septic tanks that expel gray water, and both of these are currently in use. And these are other courthouses that we've done. Again, some of the layering, our plugin becomes just another part of this layering of history. And we've also added space to these houses. Here we have a mezzanine level that doubles the amount of square footage that you have. This is again our office. This part is our office. This is a community center, and this is a local resident that basically grew up here. And aside from really trying to make these spaces more livable, we believe that it's really beneficial to have such a variety of different types of people and different uses all in one courtyard house. We don't do any projects that are completely empty courtyard houses. We think those are very easy to do, and usually they're sort of bought up by wealthy people. But in these cases, these spaces are usually just left empty. Now, Mr. Song lives with his daughter, and they used to live in just this one little space, about 20 square meters. And what we did for them was add a mezzanine level, so now she can have her own space. He has his own space. She's really taken to the house and has done some interior design, which I would never be able to do, but I'm very happy to see what she's done. And this is Miss Dong's house, the lady with the shower. Here, she can tell you a little bit about her experience and her plug-in.
90平呢，非爱住，这孩子不愿意跟这待着，走一天都想回来，走吧，回去吧，他不愿意跟这待着。你出去什么都没有，这儿嘚儿出去了，转去了，哪儿都去都成，你比这儿差远。
She's representative of a lot of residents here that really are adamant about not leaving these neighborhoods. She actually has an apartment outside of the city, but insists on staying here. And we think that this is really important to preserve the kind of culture of these neighborhoods. During the first winter, she went into the first plugin that we built, which was just across from her. And while before she was very skeptical, she walked in and she was like, "Wow, this is just really warm." It's amazing how warm this is. And you do have subsidized heating, but it's not enough in the coldest times of winter. And she knows that very well. So then she decided to also get a plug-in for herself. So one thing that's interesting about her particular plugin is that accordion shower, and I'd like to explain this a little bit. So these are informal additions that a lot of residents will build, and what happens is you have to walk outside of your house into these additions because they're not connected inside. And so you get these doors that are next to each other at 90 degrees, and what they'll do is they'll open them up so that they create a little space. So this guy will open up here and this guy will open up here, and they tie that together to be used as kind of a little showering space. So when we built hers, we connected all the interiors, of course, but we didn't want her to lose out on this extra shower space. So that's the story behind the accordion shower. We really try to learn a lot from the residents, and that's actually where we get a lot of our design ideas. This is the last project that I'm going to be showing, and this is just taken a few days ago, and it's a very special one for us because this is the first plugin that is not subsidized by the government at all. It's just purely funded by a local resident, and that means that we've been able to convince them that this is something that's worth doing, and also the cost is affordable. And so our clients are just everyday people. I'm not sure if there's so many examples of this kind of thing. And I think I have about a minute, so I'd like to tell a small story about this. This is just something I heard today, this morning. So that this project was stopped with one more panel that had to be put in. It was stopped by the police because her neighbor had called the police and said, the neighbor said, I want this to stop. And it turns out that they have this sort of like 15-year-old dispute between them. People live very close to each other, so there's also a lot of conflict. And the neighbor used this situation as a way to really meet with her and, I don't know, maybe just kind of let bygones be bygones, and they had a long discussion, and the result was the end of this kind of very long conflict between them. And the neighbors said that actually they're fine with it, and in fact they want to have a plugin for themselves. So I don't know, these kinds of situations sort of take really interesting turns for us, and I guess have ended up helping us promote the project as well. Thank you.